What will the reception be like when Jurickson Profar returns? What will the Atlanta Braves do with Ozzie Albies long term? I'll answer those questions and many more on today's mailbag episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I'm your host, Jake Mastroianni. You can follow me on social media at ShortstopBall. Check out the podcast there at LockedOn_Braves on X and Locked On Braves on Instagram. If you're new and watching this on YouTube, please do me a huge favor. Hit that subscribe button, hit the thumbs up button, leave me a comment down below. If you're listening on the audio version, you can help out by leaving me a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. And just a little note here early on for those that do listen on the audio version, had some problems uploading the podcast last night on our platform where we do so. So that went out earlier Friday morning. So you may have missed Thursday night's episode. You want to go back and give that a listen. So just want to give you that heads up for our audio only listeners, which are a big portion of you. Thank you so much on the audio side for continuing to subscribe or to listen each and every day. Do appreciate all support that you give me over there. On today's mailbag podcast, as usual, have a wide variety of questions to get to. Looks like we got over 20. That's the most I've gotten from you in a long time, but several of them do have to do with Jurickson Profar, his return. What does the outfield situation look like with Alex Verdugo? We got several on Ozzie Albies as well. I'm probably going to have to do a bigger episode at some point, maybe next week, looking into Ozzie Albies and just what's going on with him. Can we get him on track? What is the future with Ozzie Albies with the Atlanta Braves? So we'll probably do a bigger episode on him specifically at some point. But as always, wide range of questions. Thank you so much for submitting these each and every week. Thank you so much for those who are joining me here live. Kyle, Josh Thomas, Battle Axe, Matt L, Doug Counts, and Lady Braves. Thank you all for being here with me live on a Friday afternoon. But let's jump right into the questions. Joey Milby, everydayer of the podcast, says Nacho moving to the 60-day was just kind of brushed over. Is his wrist hurt that bad? Any word on him? I'm sure it was backdated and he may be available in late May, but still. So Lindsay and I actually had this conversation off air when we finished recording a postcast the other night, that it's really strange that Nacho got hit in the wrist in spring training, never saw him again. At the time, it seemed like it wasn't going to be anything major, that he might be back at the end of spring training, but we never saw him again, never heard anything once the minor league season started. Obviously he wasn't playing, and the only update we got is that the Braves moved him to the 60-day injured list, and that's still really the only update we've got. I haven't seen any beat writer or anybody ask about it, which they don't generally ask about prospects anyway, but that's all we have. That's all the information we have. So I would assume that it had to have been pretty serious for him to be out this long, which is a real shame because I think he's the backup at third base right now, or at least he was when he got hurt. So, and it's unfortunate too, because it seems like every year Nacho's had a little bit of injury issues. Nothing that's been really even as long as this, but it just feels like he's had some sort of injury hiccup every season that's cost him a little bit of time. And here you are in a big year for him. He's at AAA. He's knocking on the door. Like I said, I think he's next in line at third base behind Riley, and now he's missing significant time. So, again, we're all just assuming because nobody's asked and the team hasn't told us anything. We're just assuming at this point it must have been a pretty serious wrist injury for Nacho Alvarez for him to not be back, and now he's on the 60-day IL, which, again, what me and Lindsay talked about, that means he's getting service time, too, if he's on the Major League IL, which he is because it's on the 60-day. So he's getting Major League service time. Next question, also from Joey, who says, with the success turning relievers into starters, do you think we are better off bringing guys like AJ Smith-Shawver, Waldrop, Burkhalter, etc. up in pin rolls to really learn how to get MLB hitters out, then worry about stretching them out later? It worked with Strider. Yes, it's what I've been screaming for a while now. Why not let these guys get their feet wet? You did it with Max Fried too. It has been a successful pattern for many guys, not just in the Braves organization, but the Braves seem to do well with that. Is let some of these very talented arms get their feet wet in a reliever role. It doesn't mean you have to give up on them as starters, but it's a way to ease them into the big leagues. Now, for Strider specifically, I think that was just a way to monitor his workload. I think he was ready to be a starter out of the gate, but you did introduce him into the bullpen, and it kind of helped, I'm sure, in some way prepare him for that starter's role. But yes, I feel like we're kind of past that point with AJ Smith-Shawver at this point, and I think he's closer to already getting there himself. But yeah, I mean, if he can't figure it out and he can't, give you 5-6 innings, then let's ease him into a bullpen role until he can figure that out and be more efficient with his pitches. Let's work on Hurston Waldrop turning into a reliever and get his feet wet that way. Let's work on Giancarlo Lara turning into a reliever and perhaps get him up that way. Blake Burkhalter, all guys that I think potentially have futures as starters, but we've seen success with the Braves doing it that way and letting them ease their way in as relievers and then ultimately move them back to the rotation. So I think they should do more of that. Emmanuel says, if you could copy one skill or talent from one player on this Braves roster and add it to another player from the team, who would be the players and what would be the skill? So very interesting question here from Emmanuel. I think there's another one like this in here too that's going to have to make me think on a Friday afternoon. My immediate thought is the bat for Marcell Ozuna, and this isn't possible just because of physicality wise, but the bat of Marcell Ozuna on Nick Allen, because then all of a sudden you have your shortstop that can play defense and be a great hitter. And that's where, the Braves have the biggest need. So that was the first one that came to mind, is how can we upgrade shortstop? And I think putting, the offensive skill set of a Marcell Ozuna, the plate discipline, the power, the approach and all that, putting that on a Nick Allen, suddenly you have an all-star shortstop, with his defense there. So that's the first one that came to mind for me. Again, not a realistic example because I just think with the physical skills, traits, maybe traits is a better word to use there, that Nick Allen has, I don't think he could match up power-wise with Marcell Ozuna. But, the plate discipline, the approach, things like that Marcell Ozuna has become so good at over the last 2 years, you put that on Nick Allen and all of a sudden you got a really good hitter. Matt Karch 829 says, I know you stated before the season the team as constructed without any moves was good enough to win the World Series. Say we get all our injured players back, but do not make any moves. Do you still believe that? Is this a World Series bullpen without any moves? So I'm glad you ended that question the way that you did, because had you just stopped before that, my answer probably would have just been yes. I think this roster and this rotation, if healthy and everybody pitching like they're capable of, is good enough to win a World Series. And I touched on this yesterday. While starting pitching depth, I think, is the biggest need for me, what I really tried to get the point across on yesterday's podcast with the bullpen is that while I trust these guys and I think it could be a good regular season bullpen, I do worry about them in a postseason situation. Daysville seems to have taken that step forward. As I said the other day, he might be the best arm in the bullpen right now, but we just haven't seen him in those big moments in the postseason. Dylan Lee, I think he's had certainly some moments, but more would be asked of him. Pierce Johnson, guys like that, De Los Santos, Aaron Bummer. I think those guys are fine, and I think this bullpen as constructed now is good enough, but that would still be the concern for me. That would be the only thing that really holds me up, that's saying, yes, this roster, fully healthy, playing to their potential, I still believe they're a World Series contender. The only hangup I would have to that is just having that lack of experience in the 7th and 8th innings in your bullpen would be the only thing that would hold me back from completely saying, yes, I believe this team is still a World Series contender. Ben says, I know that Jurickson Profar was thought to be our leadoff hitter until Ronald came back, and then everyone would slide down a spot. Is that still going to be the case with Verdugo, or is Riley more valuable hitting second? I don't think there is a wrong answer. So I think if Verdugo's not batting leadoff, he's batting either 4th or 5th, or maybe even further down in the lineup than that. He's probably batting further down in the lineup than that, maybe 6th or 7th. So I think when Acuna comes back, you bat him leadoff, you put either Olsen or Riley behind him, and then Ozuna, and then either Olsen or Riley. That's my top 4 in whatever order you want to put them in. And I think after that, if Ozzie's hitting well, you put him there. If Harris is hitting well, Murphy. I think behind him, as me and Lindsay have talked about on the postcast, I think you put whichever your hottest hitter is behind those guys. Right now it seems to be Murphy, so I'd put him in that 5th spot, either he or Drake Baldwin, and then I'd follow him up with Ozzie and Michael Harris, and then I'd probably put Verdugo down in that 6th, 7th spot in the order. I think Snitker's going to have to be flexible with that 5 through 7 spot in the order and just stack them in the way that those guys are swinging the bat right then. But I do think the top 4 would be Acuna, Riley, Ozuna, Olsen, in some order like that when he returns. I got a lot more questions to get to. I'm going to move through these a little bit quicker today, but that's all right. A lot of great questions, some more on Profar and some on Ozzie. We'll get to those here next. Did you know your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with a Fire TV Stick 4K device. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to go. Dive into hundreds of premium titles, including EA Sports College Football, MLB The Show, Call of Duty, and Avowed as easily as you stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. With Wi-Fi 6, 6E, and auto-low latency mode advanced technology, Fire TV Stick 4K delivers smoother, more responsive gameplay with lightning-fast speeds you need to stay competitive. Play high-quality Xbox games at a fraction of the cost of a console. Already have a console? A Fire TV Stick 4K device is more affordable and easier to travel with, allowing you to take your and your kids' games wherever you go. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On. That's Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. It's available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube 3rd Gen. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Braves your first listen of the day. Go check out the guys over at Locked On MLB. Well, they got several podcasts coming your way in that Locked On MLB podcast feed, from Sully's show to the MLB Game Night guys, which Lindsay's a part of. Make sure you check them out over there at Locked On MLB. 10-Day IL says, a few targets I would like to swap of Detmers for Waldrop, a few big names for Freddie Peralta, or a haul for Yon Duran. I wouldn't do Detmers for Waldrop. Even as much as some people are down on Waldrop right now, I'm not that far down on him, even though I do like Reed Detmers. And I think you get him a change of scenery, get him on a team that's good at developing pitchers like the Braves. Maybe you can turn him into something, but I still think you'd be paying a pretty high price for a guy that is a buy low candidate. I mean, he's just sitting in the Angels. He's basically the Angels' Jose Suarez right now. A few big names for Freddie Peralta could be an interesting one, or a haul for Yon Duran from the Twins. I don't mind either of those guys. Those would be some pretty big swings at the trade deadline if they were able to pull those off. I just don't know that the Braves are going to give up the type of prospect that it takes to get somebody like that at the deadline. Chris says, what do you think needs to happen with our pitching staff for it to improve? Do we need to bring in arms, or is this just a case of getting those that are struggling on the right track? So this is the point I've been trying to hammer home over the past week or so. When I say I'm not worried about the rotation because it's going to be Chris Sale, Spencer Strider, Spencer Schwellenbach, either they are who they're going to be or they're not. And if they're not, then this rotation's in trouble. You're just, like I just said with Freddie Peralta, I don't know, I don't think that the Braves are going to pay the prospect price to really get anybody that's better than one of those three. So either those three are healthy and ready to go come the right time, and they have good seasons, got to get there first, because we're at that point right now where we just got to get there. But either those three are going to be your aces at the top of the order, they're going to be healthy and ready to go, or this team's going to be in trouble. And it's really just a matter of that, having those three guys healthy, pitching like they're capable of. There's really nothing outside of that you can do to improve, because I don't think they're going to be trading for anybody of note. I guess I'll say that. I don't think even a Freddie Peralta, I don't think they're going to be making a big trade at the deadline for, unless there's a major injury. If there is a major injury at that point to one of those three, and already you're going to be without one of them, and you're in the postseason hunt, you're going to need another top of the rotation starter, then maybe that forces the Braves to do something. It's just, we haven't seen Alex really do that at the trade deadline. And so I'm not predicting that it will happen. So I think it is going to be very dependent on those three guys being healthy and pitching at the top of their game. And that's really what it comes down to for this pitching staff. Dustin Mounts, with Verdugo playing well and a good addition to the lineup, if he continues and Profar comes back, how would you handle playing time for both, bearing no more injuries? So Obviously, we're a ways away from that. I believe it's early July when Profar returns, so we still got 2 months before we really have to get into this conversation, and a lot can happen between now and then. But assuming no injuries, assuming Verdugo is a valuable piece, and Verdugo in many regards is the very similar type of player to what you got in Profar. Not quite the walks and on base ability of Profar, but somebody that's not going to hit a ton of home runs, although that was the case for Profar. But who knows if that was legitimate now at this point. So there's similar type of skill sets, honestly. And if Verdugo continues to play well, and give the Braves that spark, I think you have to find ways to get him in the lineup. It probably becomes a situation where you look for opportunities to get Ronald off his feet, which I think you're going to have to do anyway throughout the season. The problem is neither one of those guys can play center field. And so it's really, you can't use it as a day to get Michael Harris, off his feet. Maybe you're facing a tough lefty, which doesn't help with Verdugo being a lefty, but I think he does okay against both sides. But I think you would just look for situations I think Profar is going to start. I guess that's the ultimate answer to this question. I think when Profar comes back, you paid him. I think he's going to get the bulk of the playing time. And I think you just have to look for spots to use Verdugo, maybe start him once a week and get Ronald off his feet, get him a start here or there over Profar too. I think you have to find ways to get Verdugo's bat in the lineup, certainly use him as a pinch hitter throughout the game for a Nick Allen or Orlando Arcia, who was ever at shortstop at that point. But I think Profar is ultimately going to be pretty much an everyday player when he comes back. He's got to earn it, though. Yeah, he's certainly going to have to prove himself, and I think it'll be a short leash, but I think Profar will still be that guy. Double A says, Marcell Ozuna has been our best hitter for the last year and a half, basically, and he seems to be getting better. It seems like he enjoys working with Tim Hires. Do you think AA would bring him back in the offseason, and do you think he would come back on a discount? It's a great question. If he's willing to come back on a discount, then absolutely. I think you look to bring him back. If he were willing to come back at $16 million or less, which is what they're paying him this year, I believe it's $16 million, I almost think you have to do that. Assuming that he goes on and has the season that, he's had the past 2 years and the season looks like he's going to have this year, 30 plus home run hitter, getting on base a ton, all fields type of approach. So a higher average type of hitter, more well-rounded hitter, like we've seen from the past 2 years. If that continues and he's willing to come back on a 1-2 year deal at $16 million or less, you got to take that. I know the Braves in some regards probably want to move on because it makes them allows them to be more flexible in the DH spot. As I've said numerous times, I think Acuna's back right now. If the DH spot is open, it's just, you have to put Marcell in there. You can't put him in the field. So it really locks up what you can do in that DH spot. So in some ways, the Braves might be ready to move on from that. The other part of this too is, are other teams going to be as open about bringing in Ozuna? Now, there's some teams and some fan bases out there that are still, upset about Ozuna's off-field issues that he had several years ago now. And I think some teams might shy away from that. So if his market doesn't heat up and he's not getting the offers that, quite frankly, one of the best hitters in baseball the last couple of years should be getting, then maybe the Braves are able to get him at a team-friendly discount. But I do think it has to be team-friendly. I think it has to be $16 million or less, 2 years or less, a year and an option, something like that, in order for the Braves to get that done, because it does kind of limit what they can do in that DH spot where you're going to need to get Acuna some at-bats, Drake Baldwin some at-bats going forward. Matt says, what are your thoughts on a pitching lab? The Braves need one, in my view. It appears to have done wonders for the Mets. They have a lot of retreads in that rotation as well as injuries, and they are still thriving, i.e. Griffin Canning. So I'm all for anything, to help development. I think it's the pitching labs and all that are a proven success at this point. So why not? So yeah, I mean, the Braves, I think they have the money. They should have the money. So why not do everything you can to give your players the best chance to improve? So I'm all for it. Emmanuel says, would you bring back Ian now that the Angels DFA'd him? I would not. I mean, anybody you can get on a minor league deal, it's fine. But just for Ian's sake, I want him to go somewhere where it's kind of the same thing like I said with Soroka. I want him to go somewhere like the White Sox where he can, it's low pressure environments and he can just work on getting back to the guy that he was before. and see if he can get back on track like Soroka did and ended up getting some good money for it. So that's what I hope for Ian Anderson. Braves just don't have the spot or the time for that. PJ's Braves, why do you think AA has been hiding away in the midst of the start to the season and the Acuna-Kelenic discussion? I've seen almost nothing from him, not even quotes in articles. Do we normally see a lot from AA? I don't know. I don't think he's hiding away. I just don't think, from what I've heard from Grant and others, there's just usually not that much availability to Alex Anthopoulos during the season. You usually don't hear much from him until, the draft and then the trade deadline, which I guess the trade deadline comes after now. So yeah, the draft and then the trade deadline, you really don't hear much from your general manager throughout the season. So I don't think he's hiding away. I just think that's pretty normal that, unless there's just some sort of major news, which, the Kelenic, Acuna, Snicker situation, that shouldn't involve the GM. That should be the manager stepping up and ending it. And Snicker, unfortunately, didn't handle it very well. But that's not on the GM to step in and say anything. So I don't think he's hiding away or anything like that with a slow start. We just don't normally hear from the GM except for a few times throughout the season. E. Goldie says, the NL is loaded. What teams right now do you think the Braves are going to be battling for a wild card spot, assuming we don't win at a 70% clip and win the division? Are the Mets and Giants truly among the best, or will they come back down to earth? I mean, I got to imagine with the hot starts that they've had, they're going to come back down to earth a little bit. But I think it's still too early to make many assumptions about what we've seen so far. I think the teams that we all thought were going to be good coming into the year, I think those are all teams that I think will still be good at the end. So, the Mets, the Phillies, the Braves, obviously you're going to be in the mix. The Cubs, I think there's a chance the Cubs just run away with the NL Central and nobody else in the NL Central matters. So that's one thing there, but I kind of thought that all along, that there would only be one real contender in the NL Central. And then the NL West, I think the Padres, the Diamondbacks, and the Dodgers are all going to be in the mix. I think the question is, do the Giants continue the path that they're on, 17-9 right now? I think that is the one surprise, but we knew the National League was going to be tough going in, that there was going to be, 7 or 8 teams, vying for postseason spots, but the Giants are probably the most surprising one. You knew the Padres, Dodgers, and Diamondbacks would all be good. You knew the Mets, Phillies, and we thought the Braves, and I still think the Braves will be good. And then you knew there'd probably be one team come out of that NL Central. So the only real surprise so far is the Giants. And I don't know if they can keep up the pace that they're on right now. And it's in a tough division. I haven't taken a look to see how many games they played within the division yet, how many times they played the Dodgers and the Diamondbacks and the Padres and them, but maybe their schedule's been a little favorable to begin the season. I haven't quite checked in on that yet, but I would imagine they'll probably come back down to earth a little bit. All right, we still got a lot more questions to get to on today's episode. Might go a little bit longer than normal, but thank you so much, as always, for sending in these great questions, and we'll get back into them here next. Well, as always, thank you so much for joining me on today's podcast and asking all of these great questions. Really do appreciate it. And like I said, I got a lot more to get into, including some on Ozzie that I certainly want to discuss. But before we do that, we have another one from Emmanuel, who says, if you could bring one Braves legend, the obvious choice being Chipper, to coach an individual player from this Braves roster, who would it be? And what would that legend focus on teaching the active player? Another good question here from Emmanuel, another thinker. I think Chipper teaching Ozzie Albies how to hitch, because they're both switch hitters. And if Chipper Jones could help Ozzie Albies become a more consistent hitter offensively, I think that would be huge. And Ozzie's obviously been a great hitter, and we're going to have some more conversations about Ozzie, so why not bring him into the mix now? But he's already had some great offensive seasons. But even in those great offensive seasons, there's been ups and downs. And there's been issues with Ozzie being a consistently good hitter. And so if Chipper could work with him on that consistency, being a switch hitter himself, I think that could go a long way. And I'm sure they've had discussions. I'm sure they've worked together. Ozzie's approach is just so different. And if you could just tool his approach to be what Chipper Jones is, which is a Hall of Famer, obviously I think that would be great. But those two being able to connect more, and Ozzie being able to learn from Chipper and have that same type of approach from both sides of the plate and be that more complete hitter that Chipper was, I mean, that would be awesome. But again, I would imagine those two have worked together a lot in the past. I was trying to think of a great left-handed hitter that could come and help out Jared Kelenic. We may be beyond that at this point, but maybe an Eddie Matthews or something like that. I don't know how fantastical we're getting in this situation that we're talking about, but yeah, I mean, Chipper and Ozzie's probably the first one to come to mind because both those guys being switch hitters. The chosen one, why didn't the Braves sign Verdugo in the first place instead of having the negative Profar situation? Because Profar was deemed a better player and a better fit for what the Braves needed at the time. Coming off a good year, talked about the swing changes, everything seemed legitimate, that the power was there for Profar to be a 20 home run hitter, and he was, the better free agent at the time. Verdugo was getting overlooked by everybody. Nobody was really interested in Verdugo until the Braves jumped in there at the last minute. So that's why they went for Profar. I think he was just a better fit overall because he gave you a little bit of that power. He gave you that on-base ability and can play in a corner outfield spot. So I think he just made a lot more sense than Verdugo. Dan Antlers, what are the chances the Braves either trade Ozzie in the offseason or don't pick up his option the way they did with d'Arnaud? Even if you think we've seen the best of Ozzie Albies, even if you don't think that he can get back to that level, I would be shocked if they don't pick up his option. It is $7 million. It is still one of the best deals in all of baseball. And so, look, maybe you're down on Ozzie right now. And again, I'm going to do a deep dive on him later, probably next week. But even if you're down on the guy, it's still just $7 million. Like you don't just turn that down for a guy that has the history that Ozzie Albies does and for the clubhouse guy that he is. And I know that's similar situation for d'Arnaud, but with the d'Arnaud situation, it was an aging player. Ozzie's not aging. He's still relatively young. And you had two catchers already in Sean Murphy and Drake Baldwin that the Braves felt confident in. I was a little surprised they didn't pick up the d'Arnaud contract, but I think that's a different situation than what it is with Ozzie. That Ozzie contract is still one of the best contracts in baseball. So I would be absolutely shocked if they didn't pick that up. But again, I think they absolutely will. Calvin Finner, how long do the Braves carry Arcia and Allen? They're redundant as they are both glove-only players, basically with Allen clearly superior. So I think there's another question talking about Eli White, and he could be that backup infielder. I think you keep both of them now just because it gives you the option if you want to pinch hit for one of them in the middle of the game. You can replace one with the other later. I do think Allen is the better option overall right now just because he can do more things, and Arcia seems to have lost his range for whatever reason this year. So if there's an opportunity to replace Arcia, then I think you would, or either of these guys, but I just don't. Who are you replacing them with right now, I guess is the question. Like who are you dropping Arcia or Allen for on this roster right now? Are you seeing a need to get rid of either one of them because you have somebody else to replace them with? So right now, no, but maybe you get to the trade deadline and you want to improve your depth. I could see maybe making an upgrade over one of them, but not right now. I don't think there's anything you could really replace them with. Smoke, especially since Braves tend to focus drafting pitchers, why don't we have our own pitching lab by now? So similar to the question earlier, I think it's probably past time for the Braves to do something like that. But they've been pretty successful developing pitchers even without one. Emmanuel, who has been the biggest letdown in the lineup so far this season, and why is it Ozzie? So I would actually say Michael Harris has been the biggest letdown in the lineup this season. I have been predicting for 2 years now that Michael Harris is going to have that breakout year. We've already seen him have some good years, but have that season where he takes it to another level, becomes a perennial all-star, and he's been a pretty big letdown at the plate. I know he's had some better at-bats here lately. I think Ozzie actually had, up until this last homestand, I thought Ozzie was having some pretty good at-bats this year, a little bit of tough luck. So I'm not as down on Ozzie as others are. I know he's coming off a rough series and has not been good in clutch situations this year, but I would say Michael Harris has been the biggest letdown so far for me. Kane Suttles, does it make sense to bring Tristan McKenzie as a hopeful spark to the rotation since he got DFA'd? And when are we getting a Jake-led postcast? Well, whenever Lindsay decides to take a vacation, maybe I'll do one on my own, but really enjoying working with Lindsay. He does a great job hosting that. I mean, again, similar to Ian Anderson, it never hurts to bring somebody in on a minor league deal if that's what you can get Tristan McKenzie for, but he has fallen off really hard. So I don't see it happening. Aaron Abston says, let's look into next year with Jurickson Profar, hopefully clean. Will he put up around the same stats, or do you think he was a one-season wonder? We don't know. It's really hard to know at this point. Look, and he got popped for the PED in the offseason. So maybe this was just something that he took in the offseason, and he wasn't taking it all last year. And I think he maybe even said as much, but we're all going to, it's a court of public opinion, whether you believe that or not at this point. So maybe he wasn't taking anything last year, and it just happened to be something that he took in the offseason, didn't realize what it was, that it wasn't on the restricted list, and he got popped for it. And if that's the case, then it's a little bit more believable that what he did last year is legitimate, but we just won't know until he comes back. Jeremy Vincent, Fritchie's comments on the Acuna social media post were very frank, to say the least. It seems to show some inside annoyance by the Braves circle with his repeated antics throughout his time with the Braves. What is your take on Fritchie's interview? That, exactly what you said. I really don't have a lot of time to get into that now, but that was my take. There was legitimate frustration and anger in Fritchie's tone and voice, and the way that he delivered that, to say that at least he himself, I don't know if he's speaking for the entire Braves front office, and I'm certainly not trying to spread rumors that everybody there is fed up with Ronald. And look, I had that tone a little bit with Ronald's comment. I think it was a dumb thing to do, even if I believe he's right in what he said, that there's some sort of double standard there. But Fritchie took it to a whole nother level that, again, leads me to believe that there's more to that he's been more frustrated with Acuna, with other past things or whatever. But it's basically what you said. It felt like there was more to it in the tone that Fritchie used in that interview, which I was just shocked by. And I didn't even necessarily disagree with everything that Fritchie was saying, but the tone that he delivered it with was almost saying more than his actual words. So that's kind of how I took it as well. Aaron Abston says, what are we expecting out of Ozzie? I'm not expecting to hit 300 with 40 bombs, but what's the expectations? 250, 260 with 25 bombs, I think should be the expectation for Ozzie. All right, those are all the questions submitted today. A lot in there. Thank you so much for submitting those. Appreciate all the support you give me here on the podcast. Thanks for those who are here with me live. Josh Thomas, Mass Boost, Protect PR, Zulu Hawk. Appreciate you all joining as well. And Josh Thomas also agreeing, you don't bash another teammate publicly like that. I agree. And look, maybe it was just a thing. Acuna felt it, impulse decision on social media. We all made the mistake. And then hopefully of his own, conclusion, he's the one that deleted it right away and didn't have to be told that. But yeah, not a great decision. Again, I don't agree with it, but it's just the level and tone that Fritchie used and saying that. Again, I think that spoke volumes with the way that he said it, which I think is wrong on Fritchie's part. I think he was being overly critical and upset with it. But thank you all for joining. Appreciate you here today. Doc's Cards, every day you're in here as well. Hopefully you're going to get to a game in Arizona, Doc. I haven't heard you say if you're going or not, but hopefully you get to a game this weekend. Aaron Abston, who had some questions, also here with me live. Appreciate you all joining today. But that would do it for today's episode of Locked On Braves. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube if you're new. Hit the thumbs up button. Leave me a comment down below. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast, whenever you get your podcast. And we will talk to you next time.